Hey everyone, it's me again. If possible, please subscribe and leave a like. It really helps us a lot, especially since we're still recovering from the strikes we got. Enjoy the video. Zhou Ingong was a young man in whom his family had placed many hopes. They believed he would become someone important, a grand figure in the world. However, time passed, and instead he ended up becoming just another youth addicted to games. That day he was especially excited because he was about to try the newest virtual reality game, the remake of Night Saga, a very popular title about the war between humans and demons. In this game, the player would normally choose between two main characters, the human hero named Locke, or the powerful eldest son of the demon king, Zephyr Ragnaros. From that choice, it was possible to venture out into the world completing missions, fighting creatures, exploring lands, and advancing through the story. Zhu, who used to finish the game repeatedly during his childhood, knew everything about it. However, this would be the first time he was trying the virtual reality version. As soon as he got home, Zhu Ingong turned on the device, inserted Night Saga, and decided that he would take it easy that day, playing only for 8 hours. The moment he entered the game, something strange happened. He was already inside the virtual reality, but there was no kind of introduction. There was no menu, no cutscene, no save system, and not even the traditional character selection screen. He simply woke up in the middle of that world, confused about who the character he was controlling was. While trying to understand the situation, an orc approached and asked if he was already awake, saying it was time to leave. Amazed by the absurd quality of the graphics, which looked way too real, Zhu wondered if this was really a game. The orc didn't understand anything he was saying, especially when he mentioned graphics. Zhu was surprised he could communicate with the character and quickly started interacting, asking what the orc's name was. The orc then replied as if he already knew him, introducing himself as Karak and stating that everyone was waiting for him, Prince Shutra. At that moment, Zhu Ingong finally understood that he was in the body of Shutra Ignis, the 9th son of the Demon King, a character who didn't even exist in the previous versions of the game. He didn't know how he had been placed in that role, since he never got the chance to choose an avatar. When he opened the status window, he saw he was indeed controlling Shutra Ignis, only 14 years old, level 1, with basic and balanced stats. Still, two skills caught his attention. One was called Conquer, and the other, Protagonist Setting Adjustment. He was intrigued by these names and had no idea what they meant. While he was reflecting on it, Karak called him again with urgency. Outside, there was an entire army of monsters waiting. It seemed like he had been thrown straight into a war. Even without fully understanding the situation, he heard they had to face creatures called Crimsonlings. With no tutorial or explanation, Shutra found himself in the middle of a real battle. As time passed, Shutra started to understand the situation better. Apparently, the orcs of the Scarlet Lightning tribe were organizing a rebellion, and he, for some reason, had to deal with it alongside the 7th prince and the 8th princess. The problem was that, at that moment, he had very few troops, since they were only on patrol and not prepared for an offensive. Exploring the game system, he discovered that there was still a minimap, which made things more practical. That would help him find the right path, as the surrounding landscape was confusing and treacherous. After analyzing it well, he decided it would take too long to follow the main trail and found a shortcut. As they moved forward through this new path, they realized it was a harder route than expected. They had to climb hills, cross clearings, and overcome obstacles until they finally reached large stone gates that marked the entrance to a new challenge. Karak looked around and asked how the prince had found that path. He was impressed and asked if by any chance he was a mage. Shutra replied that he had no idea how he managed to find it. The orc noticed the prince looked exhausted and asked why. Shutra, meanwhile, thought to himself that he didn't know being level 1 could be so tiring. At the very moment he complained, something unexpected happened. He leveled up, and suddenly his whole body was filled with a refreshing energy as if he had slept through an entire night. Earlier he had noticed that all his stats were only 5, which he thought was very low. Now, after leveling up, he saw that each of them had increased by 2 points, and he had received 2 extra points to distribute. That was incredibly strong for a simple beginning of a journey. While Shutra was analyzing his new status, the orcs had already knocked down the large stone gates and were invading the interior of the cave. He realized the situation would be complicated, but at least he wasn't alone. In addition, there was something that gave him more confidence, that feeling of having protagonist protection, as if fate itself was on his side. The corridors were narrow and dark, with rocky walls that looked like they had been hand-carved. Karak commented that they had probably been dug out by dwarves, creatures that no longer existed but once thrived in that world. Moving forward, they finally found an ancient treasure. The orcs were ecstatic to discover weapons, shields, and gold coins. Shutra, though curious, wasn't as thrilled. difficult. The weapons required levels and strength he didn't yet possess. Still, he decided to store everything in his inventory and was surprised by how easy it was to use. He just had to think about opening it, and the inventory would appear before him, like a reflection of his will. While organizing the items, he noticed a signal on the minimap indicating enemies approaching. He tried to warn the orcs, but it was already too late. Part of the cave walls collapsed, bearing several of them. From the smoke and rubble emerged a red-skinned orc wielding a magical scepter, Kai-chan, the general of the Scarlet Lightning tribe. As soon as he gave the attack order, Shutra's allied orcs began to be slaughtered. Not knowing what to do, Shutra thought about trying to steal some kills to gain experience. He found an opening and attacked the first red orc he saw, but his sword broke upon impact. Terrified, he tried to run, stumbled, and fell face first to the ground, left with only one hit point. Before he could be struck again, Karak appeared and saved him at the last moment, pushing him out of the way. Trembling, Shutra began to realize how real everything felt. The fear, the pain, the exhaustion. None of it resembled a simple game. He thought he might have played enough for the day and decided to try logging out. However, upon opening the menu, he found no logout option. That was when he realized the horror of the situation. He was trapped inside Night Saga. As he tried to figure out what to do, Kai-chan gathered energy into his scepter and cast a powerful spell. Several magically imbued stones flew toward the prince. One of them hit him directly in the chest, launching him against the wall and reducing his life to 0. The world around him went completely dark. When he opened his eyes, Shutra found himself in a silent, empty place, surrounded by darkness. He wondered if he had died or if he was in some kind of afterlife. In that void, a glowing figure appeared, a goddess surrounded by light. She told him that he was the chosen one of that reality and that he needed to free himself in order to lead. Meanwhile, back in the cave, the orcs of the Scarlet Lightning tribe continued to wipe out the few survivors of Karak's troop. General Kai-chan watched the scene with disdain, commenting that perhaps the enemies were ignorant or simply stupid, and ordered their immediate extermination. But to everyone's shock, the prince's body began to move. Shutra Ignis slowly stood up, even after having been mortally wounded. Kai-chan was stunned, unable to comprehend how this was possible. The prince not only rose, but also saw a system window appear before him, displaying a new message and a special reward, a sign that something far greater had begun. After reappearing before everyone, Shutra received a clear message from the system stating that he had acquired a new skill called telekinesis, along with a unique subclass called Knight of Conquest. Instinctively, as if he knew exactly what to do, he planted the broken blade into the ground. A different feeling began to surge through his body, as if spells and abilities were beginning to echo directly inside his mind. He activated the special ability known as Power of Conquest, a power that belonged only to kings and princes. He used his first technique, known as Beneath the King's Banner, which significantly strengthened all nearby allies. With this boost, Shutra's allied orcs managed to defeat several warriors from the Scarlet Lightning tribe much more easily. Kai-chan himself, the enemy general, was surprised by the sudden shift in strength. He found it all absurd and quickly realized that the cause of this turnaround was none other than Prince Shutra Ignis. In response, Kai-chan cast another spell guided by his crimson power. He used telekinetic force to hurl sharp stones at high speed. However, Karak, always vigilant, protected the prince once again. With a swift advance, he counterattacked with his axe and managed to decapitate Kai-chan, putting an end to the battle. The enemy orcs, upon seeing their leader dead, fled in desperation. Soon after, the system notified Shutra that the victory had been achieved thanks to his leadership. As a reward, he leveled up 3 times at once. Karak, still confused, wondered where that mysterious power flowing from the prince was coming from. Sometime later, back at the war camp, Shutra kept trying to find a way to leave the game, but no matter how much he searched, he simply could not find any option in the system that allowed him to return to his reality. Trying to stay calm, he reflected on everything that had happened so far. His first assumption was that he was trapped inside a virtual reality. Perhaps a bug in the game or the device had caused it. With luck, it could be fixed in a future update. But there was also a second possibility, one more absurd yet more convincing. Maybe he was no longer in a game at all. Maybe this was now his new reality. Just like in the novels he had read, where protagonists are transported into fictional worlds, everything here felt far too real. He could feel pain, talk to characters, and most importantly, when he looked at his own body, he noticed there was no censorship like in normal games. Even so, he still wondered what he needed to do to return to his original world. He thought that maybe he would have to die there to wake up in reality, but he wasn't sure. What if dying in that world meant dying for real? While he was deep in thought, he was interrupted by one of the orcs in the camp. The orc said he wanted to talk to the prince and invited him to a friendly duel later. He explained that he wanted to see the true combat level of his leader, but promised to go easy on him. Shutra found it strange strange that someone would say that to a prince but accepted the challenge. When the duel began, he went all out against the orc, but soon realized that his attacks did not even leave a scratch. The orc retaliated with a simple tap, which ended up sending Shutra flying. Still on the ground, the orc asked if the prince was all right. Struggling, Shutra replied that it was just a bit sudden. Even so, after falling and taking that hit, the system reacted once again. He had acquired a new ability called Basic Swordsmanship Level 1. That reminded him of how he had obtained his telekinesis. He was hit, fell, and the system seemed to absorb the experience as direct physical learning. Convinced that his training had only just begun, Shutra stood up and told Karak that he was not finished. They continued the duel. To the orc's surprise, the prince was getting better and better. His movements were quicker, and his strikes were sharper, completely different from how he had fought at the beginning of that friendly match. Feeling more confident, Shutra asked how he was doing. He said he wasn't bad, right? Then he wanted to know Karak's level. The orc replied that it was just an estimate, somewhere around level 21. At that moment, Shutra himself was at level 7. It was explained that, in that world, people could not easily check their levels. Unlike him, who had access to a status window like in a game, ordinary inhabitants needed magical artifacts and specific spells to assess their levels. That meant the system Shutra possessed was a tremendous advantage compared to everyone else. With the status and skill system he had, Shutra understood that he held a huge advantage in that world. He could grow stronger much faster than anyone else. That was essential, because he knew very well the direction of the story in the demonic arc of Night Saga. In that arc, the protagonist was Zephyr, the eldest son of the Demon King. The narrative followed his rise to power, showing how he surpassed all his brothers and became the new king. The story was long, with many chapters, but Shutra knew which one was the most important. The Great War that marked the climax took place in the year 517. It was during that event that Zephyr killed all his brothers to achieve his goal. And when the system said all of them, that included Shutra Ignis himself. Looking at the current world calendar, Shutra realized they were still in the year 512. That gave him a 5-year window to change his fate. He needed to grow stronger than Zephyr and prevent his brother from gaining enough power to start that massacre. Later, Karak appeared, reminding him that he had forgotten about a meeting. Upon returning to the camp, Shutra encountered 2 of his siblings. The first was the 7th prince, Chris Moonlight. At his side was the 8th princess, Caitlin Moonlight. Both were children of the 4th queen, Elaine Moonlight, also known as the mother of the lycanthropes. To Shutra, the 2 of them were a nuisance. However, he also knew that one day before the massacre in the year 517, they had not only been killed by Zephyr, but also betrayed by their other siblings. The reason was cruel. Caitlin was considered a bastard by the other princes, even though she was the legitimate daughter of Queen Elaine. During the meeting, Caitlin questioned why Shutra had acted without following the plan. According to her, the prince had only been sent on a patrol, nothing more. He replied that he hadn't known he would encounter enemies there. He hadn't prepared for a confrontation. Despite showing irritation, Caitlin soon stood up and asked if he was hurt. There was, in fact, concern in her voice. She said he should take better care of himself. That attitude surprised Shutra a little. He hadn't expected the Demon King's children to be so close to one another. Chris, for his part, also showed concern. He said that if the prince risked himself like that again, it wouldn't just be a scolding he would receive. All of this made Shutra reconsider the image he had of them. After all, despite belonging to the infernal court, his siblings showed themselves to be kind and loyal people. He also remembered something important. Lycanthropes, by nature, had abilities related to aura, due to the great vitality of their race. That would be extremely useful to him in future battles. So, without hesitation, Shutra asked if his 2 siblings could teach him how to use aura. The request caught both of them by surprise. They hadn't expected the prince, usually so reserved, to ask for something like that. Even so, their eyes showed curiosity and perhaps even a willingness to help. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the continent, in the lands ruled by the orcs of the Scarlet Thunder tribe, chaos had erupted. Many green orcs were now fighting back, killing their former Scarlet allies. In response, the Scarlets began eliminating even their own, in a display of brutality and disorganization. Amidst all this, a great warrior of the tribe walked among the bodies, eliminating anyone who crossed his path. His presence was so feared that he promised rewards to those who killed the most enemies. A new threat was rising in that savage land, and his thirst for blood seemed endless. At the same time, Shutra once again found himself in his own consciousness, face to face with the same goddess who had granted him power in the past. But this time, he also sensed the presence of other gods around him. When he woke up, he couldn't tell if that had been just a dream or something more real. Beside him, one of his companions immediately asked if he was okay and why he had asked the princess to attack him. Shutra, however, felt strangely happy for having done that. Soon after, the system informed him that he had acquired a new skill called aura. His companion asked if he had awakened the aura because he had been struck by it. Shutra replied that it seemed to be the case. He also confirmed that the light spell used during the previous fight had been cast by the same prince. Curious, Shutra then asked if anything had happened while he was unconscious. That was when Karak explained that the main enemy force came from the Scarlet Orcs. Shutra had thought that only he and his siblings would be assigned to that mission, but his companion clarified that this would be impossible, as that tribe was enormous. The true leader commanding the Orcs was General Bandal, a great red-skinned Orc who had helped the Green Orcs and the Princes fight against the Scarlet Thunder Orc tribe. That information made Shutra remember something very important. According to his memory, Bandal would only become Jepur's subordinate in the year 515. That meant he still had time to act and could try to win the general's loyalty before that happened. He already knew everything about the Orc, his goals, the rewards he desired, his favorite food, his talents and skills, but the most important point was that, to earn his respect, Shutra would have to defeat him in a duel. Only then could he gain his submission. If successful, not only would he prevent Jepur from gaining a powerful ally, but Shutra would also acquire an extremely valuable subordinate. Later, at Caitlyn's camp, Shutra demonstrated to his siblings that he had already mastered level 1 of aura expansion. He reflected that he had only achieved this because he had used his points to enhance his own aura, which he considered a wise decision. Aura increased all physical capabilities and was therefore far more useful than the telekinesis skill he had previously possessed. Meanwhile, Chris decided to leave that subject aside and asked if Shutra could make a map of the underground area. Under normal conditions, he wouldn't have been able to, but thanks to his mini-map, Shutra created the map with great ease. Chris was impressed and called him a genius. Caitlyn took the opportunity to mention that all the Scarlet Orcs who had passed through the tunnel were dead, so they had no idea that their group now also knew that path. Chris stated that they would use those tunnels to prepare a surprise attack, and then they told Shutra he still needed to complete one last task. Later, Shutra went on patrol again, this time accompanied by Karak and his orcs. The good news was that this time they had received reinforcements. However, along the way he came across his sister and asked why she was disguised with a cloak. Caitlyn explained that she was secretly following him in case something went wrong. She said it was merely a security measure since that mission could be very dangerous. Shutra, however, wasn't so sure it was a good idea and thought that maybe she was being a bit foolish. At her side was her loyal attendant, Sira. Soon after, everyone entered the underground tunnel. As they walked, they found several chests and empty crates. Shutra then wondered why they had taken everything but left behind the weapons he had found earlier. Karak replied that perhaps those weapons weren't valuable enough to justify the effort. Suddenly, Karak sensed the approach of enemies through the minimap. Shutra also saw them and immediately checked his inventory. Inside, he found a special reagent capable of triggering a powerful flash of light. He warned the group that, once he gave the signal, everyone should close their eyes. A few moments later, several creatures began to emerge from the tunnel. They were stone spiders. Shutra gave the signal and everyone quickly shut their eyes. The light explosion was intense and had a huge impact on the spiders, which were heavily affected. Shutra knew very well that those creatures were extremely sensitive to light, as they lived underground and rarely came into contact with brightness. For that reason, he was sure the burst of light would stun them enough to give a solid advantage in the fight. And that was exactly what happened. Thanks to the light, the battle began with an advantage for the group. Shutra quickly remembered that stone spiders always hunted in groups, and each group had a leader. Using his minimap, he swiftly identified the leader's location. He and Karak pushed through the enemy lines until they reached the enormous stone spider. Karak was the first to attack with all his strength, but even then his blow didn't cause a single scratch on the creature's hardened carapace. Shutra knew that the monster's weakness was fire, but at that moment he didn't have any fire-based spells or equipment to use. As he was thinking of a solution, the creature opened its true eyes, revealing itself to be fully active and dangerous. Shutra warned Karak that the spider's weakness was fire, but Karak responded by asking where he was supposed to get fire in that situation. At that moment, Caitlyn, who had been hiding in the shadows with the intention of helping if necessary, cast a spell that wrapped Shutra's sword in flames. Right after that, when the spider tried to strike him with one of its legs, Shutra dodged the blow with agility and counterattacked with his flaming blade. He landed a precise sequence of strikes, scorching the creature's body and finishing the battle successfully. At that very moment, he advanced directly to level 9. Caitlyn approached to ask about the glow that appeared around him during the battle. Shutra, still catching his breath, replied that it was a kind of blessing called Gandharva. She then wanted to know if he had faced that type of creature before, but he simply said he had read about them in a book. That was enough to convince her, even though he was only hiding the fact that he had access to information no one else possessed. While they explored the rest of the tunnel, Karak spotted something unusual in the distance. Massive massive metal doors guarding what looked like a chamber. Behind those doors was a magical portal, and he asked if Shutra knew what it was. The prince replied that he was not sure, but he had a suspicion. Observing the patterns engraved into the metal, Shutra recognized the craftsmanship of the dwarves. He remembered that when playing as Jepir, those patterns never appeared, but when playing as the human hero, they would often show up. He explained that by injecting mana into the orb in the room, the portal would be activated. Sira, Caitlyn's assistant, examined the carvings and confirmed that the style indeed matched dwarven designs. They decided to explore the chamber more carefully to discover where the portal led. At the back, they found some inscriptions on the wall. They were written in the dwarven language. No one there could read that language except, surprisingly, Shutra himself. He read aloud that it was the second portal of Gishka Mountain, connected to the third. However, he was confused about how he was able to understand the language. At that moment, the system revealed that he had just acquired knowledge of the dwarven language. This surprised him, as he did not know it was possible to learn languages in that way. Next, Shutra explained that to activate the portal, someone had to inject mana. He asked Caitlyn to do it, claiming he was not feeling well. But the truth was, he still could not manipulate mana. When she injected her energy into the orb, the portal activated and revealed a holographic map showing the entire structure of Gishka Mountain. Shutra explained that the points on the map represented the portals, and the closest one from there was likely the third portal. Karak commented that the portal could be extremely useful, as it would allow them to catch the enemies by surprise. However, Caitlyn stopped the exploration and said they should end it there, stating she needed to report all of this to her brother. Later, Chris confirmed that he had been informed about the portal and praised Shutra's work, saying that if he wanted anything, all he had to do was ask. Shutra thought for a moment and then asked to learn the Beast God Fist art. Chris reacted with absolute shock, as he had not expected that request. Shutra knew he could not use weapons properly due to his current stats and level, but body techniques were different. He believed that this type of skill might be the best path for him at the moment. The Beast God Fist art was a legendary technique passed down from generation to generation only within the lycanthrope royal family. In simple terms, it was a secret S-rank art known for its devastating power. Shutra knew how bold his request was. He fully understood how absurd it sounded, and that if Chris refused, he would understand completely. And that was exactly what happened. Chris said he could not teach such a restricted technique since it was a secret of the royal bloodline. However, as an alternative, he offered to teach Shutra some aura techniques instead, asking if that would be enough. Shutra replied honestly that it was more than perfect. He was satisfied with what he would receive. With this display of mutual trust, both Chris and Caitlyn said that maybe now they could finally call him brother. And when Shutra shook his brother's hand, he felt that the word carried far more weight than it seemed. Even though they were children of the same father, there was something symbolic and profound in being truly recognized as siblings. He accepted and said yes, they could call him that too. Immediately afterward, the system confirmed that he had established an alliance with Crazy Caitlyn Moonlight, and that the status of the alliance was stable. Meanwhile, in another region, more precisely in one of the few remaining camps of the Scarlet Orc tribe, the sixth princess Felicia Doomblade was being held as a hostage. Back where Shutra was, he was taking a moment of rest to carefully analyze his own status. That was when he noticed something intriguing. Since his earliest levels, all of his attributes had increased by 2 points per level up. However, over time, his charisma stat had started to rise by only 1 point per level. That made him curious. In the Night Saga system, the original game, charisma and appearance were separate attributes. Appearance referred to physical beauty, while charisma was tied to how a person presented themselves to others, their presence, and their influence. Shutra thought it made sense, since his growth had been very fast. He was already close to reaching level 10. In the game, when a character reached level 10, Japir unlocked the title Descendant of Darkness, while Urilok gained the special trait The Chosen One. Shutra wondered if, upon reaching the same level, he would also receive a special trait. At that moment, Karak appeared to inform him that the army was ready to depart. The orcs were all in position, and Shutra agreed there was no time to waste. Soon after, the armies of Caitlyn, Chris, and Shutra joined forces to clear the region, fighting and eliminating the local monsters, opening a path for their leaders to use the newly discovered portal. The lycanthrope researchers had confirmed that the portal was connected to the river near Gishka Mountain, making it a strategic route. When the lycanthrope mages injected mana into the orb, the portal opened, revealing its magical glow. Shutra was completely fascinated to see a real portal before his eyes. Upon crossing it, they all found themselves in front of a massive enemy camp. Just by judging the size, Chris estimated that there were more than 5,000 troops present. He then proposed a direct plan. If they attacked from that direction, the supply stores would be the most most vulnerable target. The idea was for General Bandal to strike from the front to distract the enemy, while their troops infiltrated and destroyed the food supplies. But something felt off. Era commented that there was something strange about that camp. Although it was gigantic, the number of visible troops was very small. Then they all heard the sound of battle in the distance. Chris asked Shutra to use his aura in his eyes to see what was happening. Even from far away, he could clearly see the Scarlet Orcs fighting against Dark Elves. Chris observed the situation and noticed that the orcs were retreating quickly, something that immediately stood out. One of the soldiers mentioned that the battle seemed to have started recently and was already at a disadvantage. Shutra, on the other hand, was more curious about the presence of the Dark Elves. Why were they there? Later, during a meeting with General Bandal, he praised the efficiency of the princes, saying they had once again proven themselves exceptional. However, he asked how exactly they knew about the existence of that portal. That was when Chris, in a gesture of recognition, replied that the credit was not theirs. It was thanks to the boy who accompanied them. Shutra responded humbly, saying it was nothing more than luck. Even so, Bandal firmly stated that he would ensure a good reward for him once they returned to the castle of the Demon King. But before that, Chris wanted to know more about the recent conflict involving another race. He directly asked about the presence of the Dark Elves. Bandal explained that the elves had entered the battle on their own, acting independently. Chris then questioned if they were fighting as official reinforcements sent by the Demon Castle. The general replied that there was no certainty. As far as he knew, that unit of Dark Elves had been conducting a reconnaissance mission when they were dragged into the battle. However, that was not even the biggest problem. According to Bandal, that unit ended up being captured by the Scarlet Orcs. The news left everyone on high alert. Shutra immediately asked who the commander of that unit was. The answer surprised all the princes. It was the sixth princess, Felicia Doomblade. Everyone was shocked. No one had expected that. Felicia was the daughter of Sylvia Doomblade, the third queen, and also a princess of the Dark Elves. She was also the twin sister of the fifth prince, Sylvan Doomblade. In the game Night Saga, both Felicia and Sylvan belonged to the faction of the fourth princess, Anastasia, and for that reason, Shutra had always seen Felicia as an enemy. Now, he wondered why she had appeared in that place, involved in a mission that apparently had no direct connection to her faction. Chris asked if the orcs had realized she was a princess. Bandal replied that there was still no confirmation. Her identity was not clear to the enemies. For that reason, the general was considering a plan to rescue her, if possible. He had no intention of negotiating with the orcs. The goal was to defeat them completely. He would gather more information and get in touch again later. Chris thanked him for the information before ending the meeting. As he turned to the others, he commented with a hint of irony that their brilliant sister had become a prisoner. Caitlin, with seriousness, said that if Felicia was still alive, they needed to save her. Chris agreed, but said it would be extremely difficult. A rescue would involve high risks. The plan could fail, and worse, one of them could die. Caitlin, however, rejected that kind of thinking. She said they should not assume the worst. Now Felicia was their sister too. Chris fell silent at that, unable to reply. Later, at the camp, he gathered everyone to explain the plan. The strategy was straightforward. General Bandal would launch a frontal attack, drawing the enemy troops away from the main camp. Meanwhile, the allied armies, including the princes, would infiltrate from the rear and attack the supply depots, causing as much chaos as possible inside the enemy base. Shutra and Caitlin were assigned to a secondary mission, rescuing the sixth princess if the opportunity arose. However, Chris made it very clear that if the situation became too dangerous, they should retreat immediately. No one could risk their life for Felicia. That irritated Caitlin, who considered the statement insensitive. She believed abandoning a sister was not an option, but Chris insisted that it was the most rational decision. Shutra noticed the heavy atmosphere in the air. It was clear to him that Chris had no real intention of saving Felicia. Something unresolved from the past seemed to exist between the two. With the plan ready, they all watched from atop the cliff as General Bandal began the assault. He advanced with his troops and caused a massive explosion at the front of the enemy camp. With impressive strength, almost alone, Bandal broke through the front line. Karak, observant as always, asked why they had not moved yet. Chris replied that they were waiting for the agreed signal. After a few minutes, Bandal ordered the immediate retreat of his troops, and that was the signal. The princes and their armies began advancing from the rear. Since most of the enemy forces were distracted at the front, the camp was left vulnerable. Shutra, guiding his forces with the minimap, led them directly to the supply depots. Although they encountered only a few enemies along the way, Karak was nearly caught off guard by a sudden attack, but Shutra managed to stop the enemy by using dagger throw, a skill he had recently acquired. One of the opponents was surprised and asked since when he had learned something like that. Shutra, however, responded casually, saying it was nothing special and that they should keep moving. He then reflected that the previous night he had tried a simple dagger throw, and for some reason, he ended up learning the new technique. It was unexpected, but it worked. As the group approached the spot where they intended to start a fire to destroy the enemy depot, Shutra's mind was restless. He was thinking about Princess Felicia. If she was imprisoned in a tent near the fire point, she could end up being burned. The only way to find her precisely was by using the minimap. That was when he identified a different symbol and decided to go there, taking Karak with him to help with the search. After some time searching the area, they found a quiet, dark, and isolated tent. Inside was indeed Princess Felicia Doomblade. She wanted to know why he was there, but Shutra did not want to waste time explaining. He immediately began to untie her, making it clear that the place was dangerous and that they needed to leave as soon as possible. Even while acting quickly, he could not help but think that having Felicia as an ally might be very beneficial in the future. After freeing her, they regrouped with the rest of the team, including Chris and Caitlin. Felicia asked if they had all come just to rescue her, and Shutra answered naturally, saying yes and questioning why she would even doubt it, as if it were obvious they would not leave her behind. However, before she could say more about it, another member of the group warned that more enemies were approaching. Shutra told the princess to follow him, but suddenly an attack was launched in his direction. Felicia had tried to warn him, but it was already too late. Shutra was hit directly in the chest by an explosion and was knocked down. Immediately afterward, more scarlet orcs appeared and charged straight at the princess. However, she was protected by someone who counterattacked with a fire arrow. It was Shutra himself, who had gotten back up and started casting fire spells at the enemies. In that moment, he was happy to have finally learned magic. Even if it was only a level 1 spell, it still felt amazing to him. But the battle was far from over. A new attack came, this time with ice arrows. The enemies seemed to be focusing specifically on Felicia. To protect her, Shutra pushed her aside and took her place, willing to take the hit. Upon being struck, he endured the attack once again thanks to his skill and ended up acquiring the ice arrow ability as well. However, the impact was much more severe this time. An ice stake pierced through his chest, leaving him with only 13 health points. Felicia didn't seem pleased and, with a sulky expression, said that no one had asked him to save her. She commented that even though he was a son of the Demon King, he was the weakest among the princes. But Shutra didn't care about that at the moment. His biggest concern was preventing her from being hit by another arrow. That's when he realized the princess had already defeated the enemy archer. Without much ceremony, Felicia pulled the stake out of Shutra's chest, leaving him in panic for a moment, but then she healed him. Upon being healed, Shutra also acquired a healing spell, which left him even more impressed with the princess's abilities. He thought it was no wonder she was considered a genius mage of the kingdom. Felicia then asked if he was feeling better, and he confirmed that he was, all thanks to her. However, the relief didn't last long. The enemies continued advancing, knocking down the green orcs who formed the front line. A new monster appeared, the blood orc, a mutation of the scarlet orcs. Felicia asked if they would have to face that creature to escape, and Shutra confirmed it, even though he knew they weren't in any condition to fight it. The truth was, fleeing was their only option. As they ran, he wondered how that monster could be so fast despite its large size. Felicia, realizing the imminent danger, asked Shutra to try to distract the enemy because she needed time to cast her magic. He, stunned, asked how she expected him to distract something that big. Right after that, the monster struck another massive blow that almost sent them flying. With no other choice, Shutra said fine. He would do his best to buy some time, even if he had no idea how to actually do it. Along the way, Shutra told Karak that they were going to try putting the plan into action. Through the system, he pulled out the dwarven dagger he had obtained from that treasure, stabbed it into the ground, and activated the king's banner, which greatly increased his allies' combat power. With that, Karak began to directly face the blood orc. His axe strikes, though not strong enough to cut or pierce the monster's skin, were effective in leaving it stunned and motionless. That was the time Felicia needed to cast her spell. Her first spell was Mud, which caused the orc to sink into the ground and be left vulnerable. Then Karak finished the attack by stomping hard on the creature's stomach. Shutra watched it all and thought that was a good result, but he also knew there were still other enemies to face. Even so, for having defeated that opponent, Shutra reached level 10. His ability called Protagonist Setting Adjustment leveled up, and now that he had reached Protagonist level 2, he received a new passive skill. He gained Battle Protection, an effect that reduces the chance of projectiles and enemy attacks hitting his body. Shutra quickly understood what it was about. It was the famous Stormtrooper effect, that typical feature in stories where the protagonist gets shot at multiple times but never gets hit. Basically, it was a kind of plot protection, the so-called protagonist armor. While he was distracted by his thoughts and achievements, Felicia interrupted him, asking what he was doing since the enemies were getting closer and surrounding them. She had bought enough time to prepare the next spell, which was a tornado. But Shutra quickly realized that it wasn't an ordinary tornado. That magic was special. It was a spiritual wind spell. Felicia had been born with an extraordinary gift that allowed her to form contracts with spirits. As he watched the great tornado swallowing up the enemies around them, he hesitated and wondered if he himself could be hit by it too. Couldn't he? Maybe he could. Soon after, a yellow flare was fired into the sky. Shutra knew that signal meant to retreat. Although he didn't understand the reason exactly, he suspected someone might be in danger outside the visible range. So he told Karak to follow the order and withdraw with the troops. However, unlike the others, Shutra decided to go alone to meet with Caitlin. Karak was confused and asked if he was really going alone, suggesting that he could go with him. But Shutra stood by his decision, saying there must be a reason behind that retreat order. At that moment, Felicia offered to accompany him, saying she didn't like being in debt to anyone and wanted to return the favor. Besides, she said she still had some red orcs to punish. Karak then wished the prince good luck and promised to wait for them. As they walked, Felicia asked if he really needed to find Caitlin and why her specifically. Shutra replied that one never knows, but he found the retreat order very suspicious. He sincerely hoped Caitlin hadn't been captured. Felicia then commented that he really seemed to care about another princess. Shutra said they were siblings and that it was natural to be concerned, or at least that's what he thought. In truth, he felt it was more about the alliance they were trying to maintain, but he wasn't going to say that out loud. Meanwhile, Caitlin was alone, without her troops, fighting several scarlet orcs. She defeated them easily, using both her fists and magic. When Shutra and Felicia arrived, they realized she didn't need help at all. Shutra thought that, in the end, there was no reason to worry about her. Caitlin then asked why they hadn't retreated, since she herself had fired the signal. Shutra replied that he came to save her, but it was clear that wasn't necessary. Upon seeing Felicia, Caitlin hugged her tightly, saying how relieved she was to see her safe. Felicia responded that yes, she was fine, and Caitlin was worrying too much. Shutra, with some relief, thought that fortunately Felicia and Caitlin seemed to be on good terms. At that moment, however, a system notification appeared with the minimap activated. He could clearly see where the enemies were coming from, and with that information, was able to chart a safe escape route for everyone. As soon as they crossed the portal, they found their troops waiting on the other side. Felicia wanted to confirm whether it was true that Shutra had found that portal. Caitlin replied yes, and that in fact, a large part of the mission's success had depended on him. Felicia was surprised, wondering when that boy had changed so much. Soon after, Chris appeared, but the atmosphere turned tense when he met Felicia's gaze. She commented that it had been a long time since the last time they saw each other. Later, with all the princes gathered in private, Chris shared what he had learned. General Bandal had reported that their side's victory was secured. The enemy known as Yakuzan had fled the camp as soon as he saw it in flames. Shutra, curious, asked who Yakuzan was, and Caitlin explained that he was the chief of the Scarlet Orc tribe. Felicia then wanted to know if he had surrendered, but Chris said not exactly. He had simply fled elsewhere and was probably gathering allies for a counterattack. That was why the next day they would have to face the forces of Frieren. If Yakuzan joined with the Frieren, that would bring serious problems. It was better to eliminate them before that could happen. Chris then asked Felicia why she was in that area. She explained that she was looking for ruins near the enemy camp, but was caught off guard, unprepared for combat, and ended up being captured. Chris wanted to know if that was the whole truth. Felicia, remaining calm, asked why she would lie. They stared at each other for a few seconds until Chris said, fine, she must be tired, and that they should all rest for now. Later, with everyone gathered around the campfire preparing food, Shutra took the opportunity to review all the abilities he had gained so far. He now had mana control, fire arrow, ice arrow, and magical healing. He had also awakened part of his aura, which was very useful in combat. It was at that moment that Felicia approached. Now wearing her true outfit, she said she wanted to talk to him. Without hesitation, she grabbed him by the collar and told him to take off his clothes. Felicia was very close, far too close, leaving Shutra completely speechless. He wondered what exactly she was trying to do. In reality, all Felicia wanted was to apply a more complete magical treatment to him. What she had done on the battlefield was only emergency aid. Now, with more time and calm, she wanted to heal him properly, since internal injuries might have remained even after the battle. After all, he had been impaled by an ice stake. During the treatment, Felicia asked about the strange light that had come out of Shutra's body in the middle of the battlefield. He replied that it happened sometimes, but quickly changed the subject. Then he made a special request to his sister. It was something only she could do. Thanks to this favor, he later acquired 3 new spells, one for healing, one for poison purification, and another for disease removal. All of them were level 1, but that was more than enough for now. Shutra understood that the system didn't just copy offensive spells that hit him. Being healed by a spell also triggered the system's copy function, allowing him to learn the ability of that spell. Later on, Shutra met with Caitlin to learn a special technique. She began teaching him the Beast Fist. During the training, Caitlin explained that the Beast Kingdom was divided into several factions, and now he would have the chance to fight like a real beast. The Beast Fist was a traditional martial art, and one of the greatest expressions of lycanthropy, practically a trademark of the kingdom's warriors. The Beast Fist technique served as the foundation for many other martial arts in the Beast Kingdom. However, the most powerful of them all was the Fist of the Beast God, a technique that Chris had refused to teach at that time, because he considered it too strong. That was why Shutra was now focusing only on the Beast Fist, the most basic and fundamental form, but still incredibly valuable. Caitlin explained that the Beast Fist used both the body's inner and outer aura. That day, she would teach Shutra the fundamentals of concentrating and channeling internal aura. When he closed his eyes and focused, he could clearly feel the energy flowing through the meridians of his body, as if it were moving through invisible channels. This energy was so close to the essence of the soul that, when pushed to its limit, it practically became the soul's own power. Shortly after, the system notified him that he had acquired the protagonist's internal energy. With that, the efficiency of Shutra's physical and magical training would increase significantly. Furthermore, as his skills evolved, new effects and traits would be unlocked. As a direct result of this achievement, he received branched abilities. One of them was Extreme Magic, which increased the effectiveness of magical training. The other was Warrior's Blood, which enhanced training related to divine power. In summary, he had received a general bonus for all types of training, in addition to hidden and special skills that would be unlocked as he leveled up. Shutra realized that this was exactly what it meant to be the protagonist. It was truly exciting. But once again, he ended up distracted by the system, and Caitlin had to shout at him to get him to focus on training again. She made it clear that if he truly wanted to learn the Beast Fist, he would need to stay focused. After that, the real training began. Shutra finally learned the level 1 Beast Fist. His hands became enveloped in a mix of aura and magical power. Caitlin was surprised by how quickly he mastered the technique. Shutra, looking at his own hands, felt as if he were holding a weapon, even though he was unarmed. Suddenly, one of the lycanthropes appeared with an urgent message for the princess. Shortly afterward, Chris summoned everyone for an emergency meeting. He revealed that the Kirin unit had vanished. It was likely that they had discovered the plan and were now trying to ally themselves with Yakuzan. The good news was that, according to the information obtained, they already knew where the enemy forces were planning to meet. Chris commented that Shutra's prediction had been spot on. Now they needed to act boldly. The decision was to join General Bandal directly to lead the assault. The group of princes and princesses would go to the front lines, along with the suppression force against the Scarlet Orcs. Later, at the main camp of these forces, the members of the delegation met General Bandal in person. Shutra was excited about the moment, because Bandal had always been one of his favorite characters in the Night Saga game. Despite being large, dark, and imposing, he seemed friendly in Shutra's eyes. Eagerly, he approached and greeted the general, happy to finally meet him. The general responded in a friendly manner, saying the feeling was mutual. However, since Bandal's hand was enormous, the handshake was done using only the general's pinky finger, as it would have been impossible for Shutra to grasp his entire hand. Later, while sleeping, Shutra had another mysterious vision. He once again found himself before the divine beings. This time, only 2 goddesses were present. A message was transmitted directly into his mind, and upon waking, he felt even more confused than before. He still did not understand who the goddess was that had granted him power the first time, nor why the other simply kept watching him. Before he could reflect more on it, someone showed up, saying the prince had overslept again. Outside, the camp was in full motion. The Green Orcs, now allies, were transporting supplies, weapons, and equipment back and forth. Shutra thought that, for this battle, he had been assigned to the left flank. Caitlin and Chris were positioned on the right flank, while General Bandal would lead the center of the front line. Felicia, accompanied by the Dark Elves due to the high mobility of her unit, was tasked with guarding the rear as a separate force. However, when Shutra truly woke up after his rest, he was already positioned on the battlefield, facing a massive army. The enemies on the left flank alone were enough to wipe out him, his troops, and 5 other units, just like his. To make things worse, Shutra was in the middle of the soldiers, unable to see almost anything due to his short stature, which made him even more lost in the chaos. Meanwhile, at the center of the battle, General Bandal remained confident. He believed they would win easily, as the front line of the Scarlet Orcs appeared poorly formed, with few soldiers. The problem was that the true attack did not come from the front, but from the rear. That was when the Scarlets advanced with one of the most dangerous creatures, the Swamp Mammoth, a devastating mutant variation. The entrance of this creature completely shifted the momentum of the battle in favor of the Scarlets, not only in the center, but also on the right and left flanks. The mammoth spewed fire in every direction and were completely unaffected by normal attacks. Shutra recognized the creature immediately. It looked like a mammoth, as the name suggested, but its size and resistance were absurdly greater. It was truly a living weapon on the battlefield. To make the situation even worse, the Kainam forces also emerged. The fierce and fast lizard warriors attacked from the rear of the left flank, where Felicia was supposed to be defending. Faced with the devastating attack, Shutra became furious, wondering where that useless Felicia was. It was her responsibility to cover that part of the battlefield, and now everyone was paying the price for her absence. In the final moment, when one of the lizard men was about to strike Shutra, Karak appeared and intercepted the blow, warning him seriously that any wrong move could mean death. He told the prince to focus, as this was a decisive situation. This snapped Shutra out of it, and he immediately regained his focus, knowing he needed to act quickly and strategically. Elsewhere, Chris and Caitlin were also facing great difficulties. Their armies were incomplete, as they had sent some of the lycanthropes to reinforce other fronts. Caitlin believed it would be better to retreat for now and wait for a new opportunity. But Chris warned that if they retreated now, they could suffer even greater losses, possibly the complete collapse of the defensive line. Caitlin, however, insisted that it was not worth losing all their soldiers in a meaningless battle. A decision had to be made immediately. Chris climbed up a cliff and called the attention of all the soldiers. He ordered the magic users to create a defensive barrier at the rear and buy as much time as possible. The frontline warriors were to retreat immediately. The priority was survival and preserving what remained of the combat force. Later, back at camp, the troops were reorganizing, receiving treatment, and resting after the forced retreat. Chris, feeling the weight of responsibility, admitted he had been too complacent. He acknowledged that he should have anticipated the enemy would be more prepared. General Bandal, trying to ease the blame, said there was no use thinking about the past anymore. The only remaining choice was to request reinforcements from the Demon King's castle, or keep retreating. Chris agreed. He said he could no longer push his men to their limits out of mere pride. At that moment, Felicia intervened. She said she had an idea. She reminded everyone that the real reason for her presence there was a mission to explore ruins, and the final destination of that expedition was precisely the Gishka mountain border. When Shutra heard that, he thought that although Felicia was indeed a powerful mage, she had never been a combat character in Night Saga. Her traits were focused on research, discoveries, and the exploration of forgotten ruins. Her proposal might have seemed risky, but perhaps it was the only viable path left to change the course of that war. Analyzing the map carefully, Felicia explained that the mountain range had been known for centuries, especially by scholars of ancient ruins. She revealed that she had been researching a specific area, the lair of the dragon Enkidu, a creature born from lava, responsible for guarding both its treasure and its own territory. Inside that sacred place, guarded for centuries, there was a relic over 1,500 years old. That relic was one of the targets of the expedition. Enkidu was a legendary dragon, respected for its power and brutality. To protect that lair, the dwarves of Gishka Mountain had forged weapons and built defenses. These dwarves had also been protected by Enkidu across generations. Among their creations, there was an artifact called the Anvil of Thunder. According to legends, this anvil could forge weapons enchanted with powerful large-scale magic spells. If the group managed to find it, it could shift the outcome of the war against the Scarlet Orcs and the Lizard Men of Kainam. General Bandal wanted to know exactly which ruin the anvil was hidden in, and whether Felicia had any specific idea. However, she admitted that she did not know the exact location. She said that, unfortunately, that was all the information she had been able to gather. Chris, growing impatient, said that in the end, it was not very useful. They did not know when the enemy would attack again, and they could not risk everything on a relic they did not even know the location of. Before Felicia could respond aggressively, Shutra stepped in and declared that he was certain the Anvil of Thunder was nearby. He explained that he had seen the relic before while playing as Locke, a warrior character in Night Saga, and that the anvil was indeed useful in later missions within the game. Shutra went on to say that while studying the dwarves, he had come across a story very similar to the one Felicia had mentioned. Moreover, he said he trusted his sister completely. Even Felicia, who always kept her composure, was surprised by such a direct vote of confidence. Chris, increasingly irritated, said that none of it mattered. He did not care who Shutra trusted or didn't trust. He just didn't want to waste time chasing something that could be nothing more than a fantasy. Shutra then decided to insist and prove he was right. He opened the map and pointed to the peak of Gishka Mountain, saying that there was a legend recorded by the Gandharva tribe that spoke of that place. He was sure that the entrance to the ruin was there and promised to take full responsibility if the mission failed. He asked everyone to trust him and declared he would give it his all. Later, the group was already riding phantom steeds, magical creatures summoned by Felicia. These flying spirit horses had a translucent appearance and were formed entirely of pure energy. One of the soldiers, visibly terrified, told the prince to hold on tight. But Shutra, upon observing, noticed that the most frightened one was the soldier himself. With the help of the minimap, Shutra estimated it would take about an hour to reach the designated location. Since he already knew the path, finding the ruins entrance would not be the problem. The real challenge would be guiding the group naturally, without raising suspicions, hiding the fact that he already knew everything because he came from another world. He planned to come up with a story as soon as they reached the right spot, something convincing for everyone. Upon reaching the indicated region, legend, Shutra explained that when he activated the portal before, he had paid close attention to the terrain layout. He had observed the cave map in detail and found similarities between the real world and the game's internal map. For that reason, he was convinced they were near the correct entrance. Still, many seemed unwilling to listen to what he had to say. Felicia, instead of contradicting him, suggested that he lead the way. She said he understood that part of the map better and should take the lead. Shutra, realizing that he might be getting tested, accepted without hesitation and ordered everyone to follow him. Sometime later, they indeed found a hidden path that led to a rocky formation. That was where Shutra believed the entrance to the ruin would be. However, the passage was completely blocked by heavy rocks. Karak analyzed the area and commented that it did not look like a ruin at first glance. Shutra, however, explained that this was not the actual entrance. He then asked if his sister Caitlin could open a path through it. He said he could use his energy to strengthen her next strike, increasing the impact against the stones. Caitlin replied that she would try, but wanted to know if he truly believed the Anvil of Thunder was really behind that cliff. Shutra explained that, according to his calculations, if they went through that path, they would not encounter any dungeon guardians. This meant they could retrieve the anvil easily without facing obstacles like a walk in the park. Felicia, however, looked at him with some doubt and asked if he really intended to force everything open using only his fists. She made it clear that she would do it in a more refined way. With her spiritual wind power, she concentrated her energy and unleashed a pressure attack that shattered all the rocks in the path, revealing hidden ruins within the mountain. Despite the initial doubt, everyone realized Shutra had been right. However, he clarified that this was not yet the anvil, but rather a final layer of security protecting it. Within those stone ruins, Shutra identified a large block, probably an ancient vault, designed to guard the true treasure. But he warned that they could not simply break it open like before, as it might damage the anvil or any other important relic inside. Shutra suggested there had to be some kind of mechanism to activate the device. Felicia, an expert in such structures, began analyzing the area carefully. She noticed that the surrounding statues were not just decorative. There were 9 in total, 3 of them holding weapons, while the other 6 were unarmed. Caitlin raised the possibility that they might need to give weapons to the unarmed statues. Felicia considered the idea valid, but noted that it might not be that simple. The statues were holding dwarven weapons, so perhaps they needed specific dwarven arms, not just any kind of weapon. That was when Shutra mentioned that, by coincidence or luck, he happened to have exactly 6 dwarven weapons. Felicia was surprised and asked where he had obtained them. Shutra explained that he had collected them previously during an expedition to another treasure, and had kept them in his inventory just in case. He said he thought it would be better to bring them along as backup, even without knowing if they would be useful. Karak was impressed and asked how he had managed to fit 6 swords of that size into a bag. Shutra simply replied that what mattered was that the swords were there and ready to use. With that settled, they equipped the remaining 6 statues with the dwarven swords. The moment all weapons were placed, a powerful magic flowed through the entire room, causing the massive stone vault to slowly open and finally reveal the legendary Anvil of Thunder. Even so, Felicia warned that this was not the end. According to her research and the legends she had studied, there was one final step needed to activate the anvil. She instructed everyone to position themselves around a disc located in the center of the stone vault. She told them to infuse their magic into the disc in a clockwise direction. Everyone prepared and began channeling their energy. With the help of Felicia's spiritual power, they managed to maintain their focus long enough for the anvil to react. Then it finally responded, releasing a thunderous sound like the birth of a storm, a sign that its power had awakened. But in the very next moment, something strange happened to Shutra. He found himself transported to another place, as if he were inside an ancient memory, witnessing the past with his own eyes. Before him was a grand war scene. The dwarves were fighting against enormous creatures, controlling swamp mammoths and various other giant beasts. And above them all, leading that army, was the mighty Enkidu, the guardian of the sacred nest. Then Shutra heard a new message directly in his mind. He needed to become the gatekeeper between the demon realm and the human realm. When he returned from this trance, he realized he had not been the only one to experience the vision. Felicia asked if everyone had seen that enormous black dragon floating amid the lava. Karak confirmed that he had. In other words, they had all witnessed the same strange and intense vision. Felicia did not know exactly what had happened, but one thing was certain in her mind. The Anvil of Thunder had finally revealed itself before them. However, the moment she approached and touched the artifact, a dark energy escaped from within it. Shutra rushed to help her, but was also struck by that malevolent power. Still, within him resided the power of conquest. Enkidu had given him a mission. He had to dominate that power. He had to conquer it completely. After some time battling battling against that force, Shutra managed to absorb all the shadow energy. Now, in his hands, a hammer emerged, forged directly upon the anvil of thunder, and something within it had changed. It carried a new strength. Meanwhile, elsewhere, one of the Scarlet Orcs was observing the Demon Kingdom's camp and noticed something felt off. It was far too quiet with few people in sight. The scout commented that he had not seen any of the princes and asked his leader Yakuzan if they should attack at that moment. Yakuzan, positioned with his entire army at the top of the cliff, ordered everyone to prepare. He said it was time to wipe out the cursed ones of the Demon Kingdom. Then the surprise attack began. Swamp mammoths, armed with magic, launched a rain of fireballs down on the camp. The advance of the Scarlet Orcs was swift and brutal. Chris, who had already returned to the camp, noticed that Caitlin and Felicia had not yet come back. He knew that if things continued this way, everyone would be annihilated. At the same time, Yakuzan, thinking he had full control of the battle, mocked the demons, saying they had doomed themselves by acting in haste. He ordered all the mages to eliminate the enemies immediately. But suddenly, something went wrong. A dark aura began to emanate from one of the swamp mammoths, which turned and began attacking the Scarlet Orcs themselves. Yakuzan was confused and shouted, demanding to know what was happening. Why were the mammoths rebelling? It was at that moment that Chris saw Shutra holding the hammer and carrying with him the anvil of thunder. He stood out on the battlefield. Upon seeing him, Felicia said it looked like Lord Enkidu himself had chosen Shutra as the new bearer of that power. She asked why he was still standing still, saying he should use the hammer immediately. Shutra was not exactly sure how to wield the new weapon, but he remembered the vision he had received. Enkidu's message echoed in his mind. He had to conquer, subjugate, dominate. Trusting that instinct, he struck the anvil with force. At that instant, the hammer responded. All of the swamp mammoths began to obey his will, turning against Yakuzan's army, tearing through their lines and opening a path for retaliation. General Bandal, taking advantage of the opening created by Shutra, led the counterattack. Several troops charged forward to crush the enemies. He believed the prince had completed his mission successfully. Yakuzan, despite having planned the perfect attack, began to realize he was losing the battle. He shouted, questioning why his own monsters were turning against him. One of the mages responded that perhaps another kind of mana was controlling the mammoths, and suggested they retreat immediately, but it was already too late. Chris appeared before Yakuzan, determined to end the confrontation. He said that the enemy's plans ended there, and that if Yakuzan surrendered, his death would be painless. However, Yakuzan refused and counterattacked with his massive axe. Even so, Chris had no trouble. Using the Divine Beast Fist art, he defeated Yakuzan with a single blow, decapitating the leader of the tribe and putting an end to the threat. With that, Chris declared that all that remained now was to finish off the remaining defeated enemies. He thought that if it were not for Shutra and Felicia, they never would have won that war. Shutra still hoped nothing bad had happened on the other side during all this. Inside the ruins, Karak asked if the vision they were seeing truly showed the battlefield and the mammoths. Felicia, still very weakened from having used most of her mana, confirmed with difficulty. She explained that, by using the Anvil of Thunder, it was possible to control all the guardians of the treasure. However, as she spoke, Felicia nearly collapsed. She was completely exhausted. After a tense moment of worry, everyone realized that Shutra was no longer there either. In truth, Shutra was outside, breathing in the fresh air and reading the system notifications. To his surprise, he had leveled up 3 times at once. That seemed odd. He was gaining a lot of experience in a short time, but he figured it must be due to Enkidu's relic. Additionally, the system notified him that his conquest level had also increased. Now, besides carrying the royal banner, he also possessed the power of the king's knights. Even without fully understanding how the system worked, Shutra didn't mind. What mattered was that he was getting stronger. Judging by the name, he imagined that king's knights must be some kind of summoning. That was when Caitlin suddenly appeared, firmly calling out to him. Shutra remembered that he had gone out without telling anyone. He apologized, but ended up getting smacked on the head so hard it sank a little. Caitlin scolded him for disappearing without saying a word. She told him never to do that again. At least she was relieved that he was safe. However, things had changed, and they needed to return to the ruins immediately, as the original plan would have to be canceled. Caitlin explained that Felicia had fainted and was unconscious. She had probably suffered the full weight of both mental and physical exhaustion all at once, since she hadn't rested properly ever since being captured by the orcs. No one knew when she would wake up. Moreover, without Felicia, they couldn't use the Phantom Corsairs. Therefore, they would have to stay there, simply watching and waiting for her condition to improve. Later, while everyone was resting, Shutra noticed something peculiar. Every time he leveled up, his energy was fully restored. He didn't feel any fatigue, even after so many battles. Reflecting a bit more, he realized that this place was an ancient ruin, which meant there were probably other doors and hidden treasures, possibly still guarded. However, now he had the Thunder Hammer. Perhaps this hammer worked as a kind of authority seal, allowing free access. In other words, a pass to move through the place without being attacked. Later on, Shutra woke Karak. saying that he had found something very interesting and asked him to follow. The two of them passed through one of the doors, and Shutra warned that they should move carefully. When they entered a chamber, Karak was shocked to see a gigantic monster. Shutra reassured him, saying that it was a griffin-shaped golem. It was an extremely powerful creature, but seemed to be asleep. Even so, Karak didn't feel comfortable around it. The aura it gave off was immense and terrifying, so he wanted to leave as soon as possible. As they continued exploring, they finally reached the treasure. The first thing Karak saw was a huge piece of armor that looked very shiny and sturdy. Shutra immediately sensed the presence of magic in that item. It was clearly a magical artifact. He then asked if Karak would like to keep the armor. Karak, surprised, asked if he could really accept it. Shutra replied that yes, he could, since the armor was far too big for him anyway. Karak thanked him deeply for the gift. Exploring the area further, Shutra also found some old gold coins, minted with images of dragons and of Enkidu himself. He asked Karak to collect everything he could carry. That was when he saw one last golden chest, still closed, waiting to be opened. In truth, it wasn't a treasure chest. When Shutra opened it, a secret door was revealed at the back, activating a hidden passage. Without hesitation, he stepped inside, believing something valuable must be hidden there. It was a secret chamber, and at its center was an artifact of immense power. The energy emanating from it was Enkidu's own mana. Since he had played Night Saga many times, Shutra immediately recognized what it was. It was the legendary Henko gauntlet known as Earthquake. He felt the artifact calling to him, and when he reached out to touch it, the system immediately rejected his attempt. It stated that his level, strength, mana, and mental power were all insufficient to wield it. But then, something changed. The system announced that permission had been granted. Earthquake had recognized Shutra as its new master. The registered user was officially changed from Enkidu to Shutra, and the gauntlet fused with his right arm. At that moment, his stats increased. His strength, mana, and endurance each rose by +10. Shutra was impressed by how much he had grown just by equipping that weapon. It was simply incredible. After confirming the new data, he stored the gauntlet inside his inventory. He now possessed an artifact far more powerful than he had expected to find. That was when Karak appeared behind him, asking what that had been. Shutra was startled by his sudden presence and wondered how long he had been there. Karak replied that he had seen everything. He witnessed the moment when Shutra made the gauntlet disappear into thin air. Shutra sighed, already imagining how complicated it would be to explain how his inventory system worked. But Karak, as loyal as ever, declared that he would not say a word. He knew that could cause trouble, so his lips would remain sealed. He said he would take that secret to the grave. Karak informed him that they had already gathered everything they needed and suggested they leave the area. Shutra, moved by his companion's loyalty, agreed. However, before they could leave, he noticed something extremely valuable among the remaining treasures. It was a high-grade mana recovery potion. Later, he used that potion on Felicia, who was still unconscious. When Felicia woke up, Caitlin explained everything that had happened. She said it was thanks to Shutra that their sister had recovered. Felicia, relieved, admitted that she had been truly worried. She asked where he had gotten that potion. Shutra reminded her that they were in ancient ruins filled with treasures and emphasized that he was the one in command now. Felicia was left speechless by that answer and simply thanked him. She recognized that none of it would have been possible without him. When they finally returned to the camp, Bundle welcomed them with great joy. He had been confident from the start that everything would work out and praised everyone for the excellent work. However, the mood shifted slightly when they met Chris. He was more serious. He cleared his throat and said that they needed to discuss a few things. He also congratulated Felicia, acknowledging that she had done a great job. She responded modestly, saying it was nothing special. Shutra noticed there was still some tension between the two, but they seemed to be slowly getting along. Chris's heart appeared to be beginning to soften. Chris said that everyone should rest a bit before dealing with the remaining problems. Even though the tribal chief was dead, there were still remnants of the Scarlet Orcs, and they would need to be completely eradicated. He estimated that this would be resolved within 15 days. That was when Shutra asked if he would get a vacation during that period, but Caitlin approached and said he still needed to do a small thing with her. The next day, Shutra was already being mercilessly beaten by her during training. Caitlin demanded that he focus more, but he was trembling in pain, his body sore and bruised. He thought he was ready for training, but he had not imagined it would be that brutal. That small thing Caitlin mentioned was actually training him in the technique of the Beast Fist. For 5 straight days, Shutra did nothing but take hits. Only after a week did he begin to land a few punches in return. On the 11th day of training, Shutra was finally trading blows evenly with Caitlin. After days of intense physical and mental effort, both his aura and the Beast Fist art reached level 5. That same night, Caitlin said that it was enough for now. Perhaps from that point forward, Shutra could begin learning the more advanced technique, the Divine Beast Fist art. She admitted she was impressed. Even she hadn't expected him to learn all those techniques so efficiently. efficiently. Shutra, in turn, was excited. At last, he was about to learn the secret art of the lycanthropes. But Caitlin said that, before that, he needed to learn another method, a method to better control his own aura. He would have to follow each step carefully. When they joined hands, both focused their auras. Caitlin's energy began to guide his to the right place. He felt it deeply, as if his very soul were opening up to transformation. Inside him, the power of conquest seemed to react, yearning to be released. When the process was complete, both his aura and the Beast Fist art evolved once again. Caitlin confirmed that he had succeeded. Shutra had mastered the Divine Beast Fist. Now he possessed both the Earthquake Gauntlet and the Supreme Lycanthrope technique. These achievements pushed him directly to level 14, and upon reaching that milestone, he realized that from that point on, the true journey was only beginning. The next morning, Shutra was having breakfast alongside Caitlin. During their conversation, he asked about Felicia. In truth, he wanted to know about both Felicia and Chris, and what had happened between them. Shutra was well aware that Felicia was a valuable ally, just like Chris, and if there was any conflict between them, it could jeopardize future plans. Caitlin explained that it was a difficult subject to talk about. An incident had occurred involving both of them directly, but she didn't know all the details. She mentioned that it had something to do with Chris and Sylvan, and that the matter should never be brought up abruptly in front of them. Shutra recognized the name. He knew Sylvan was Felicia's twin brother, and a difficult character to deal with in Night Saga. So he asked what exactly had happened between Chris and Sylvan. But before Caitlin could respond, Chris entered the tent, almost catching them mid-conversation. Luckily, he hadn't heard anything. He simply ordered everyone to begin packing, as it was time to leave. They were ready to return to the kingdom and report the results of the mission. Later, during the farewell, Bandal approached and said that young Shutra had grown a lot. He looked forward to the day they could fight side by side again. Shutra replied that he felt the same. With that, the group departed, heading straight to the castle of the Demon King, his father, the absolute ruler of that realm. The journey back was simple and peaceful. Their first goal was to reach the long-distance portal, a magical artifact that allowed for instant teleportation. To reach it, they would have to travel 3 days on horseback, which meant camping outdoors once again. During the night, while everyone else slept, Shutra found himself deep in thought. The next day, he would be standing before the Demon King himself, and despite everything he had been through, the thought still made him nervous. In fact, Shutra was more than a little nervous. Currently, the castle was divided into 3 major factions: that of the second prince Zephyr Ragnaros, the first prince Baikal Ragnaros, and the fourth princess Anastasia Nekrion. In the struggle for the throne, the order of birth meant absolutely nothing. What truly mattered was the accumulation of achievements and power, because only the one who proved to be the strongest and most capable would earn the right to rule over all demons. Among these contenders, Baikal and Zephyr were full-blooded brothers, meaning they shared the same father and mother, both inheriting the draconic power of their mother's clan. They stood on equal footing. If Shutra had to choose one of them to be king, he would probably choose Baikal, since he was older, more mature, and more responsible. However, Shutra knew that personal preference didn't matter. One day, everything would change, and that's why he needed to be prepared for when that moment finally arrived. His first step would be to raise his own power level in order to fully wield the Earthquake ability and extract the most from the powers he had received in this new life. With that in mind, he decided to consult the system and test a new skill he had recently unlocked called the King's Knights. At first, he thought it was a summoning skill, but he quickly realized it wasn't quite like that. In truth, it was a party creation ability, something like a guild, where he could choose knights who would remain loyal to him. This ability increased the total health of group members, and even allowed for the summoning of a knight commander. Shutra was surprised by how powerful the skill seemed, even at just level 1. He imagined how it might become once fully developed. While thinking about that, Karak appeared, questioning why the prince was skipping sleep again. He seemed worried about Shutra's health, as he insisted on staying awake night after night. But Shutra thought he had arrived at the perfect time, as he wanted to conduct an experiment with him. Later, the experiment turned out to be a blessing ceremony. Shutra was blessing Karak, naming him his loyal and personal knight. As soon as the blessing was completed, Karak felt a new power flowing within him. His loyalty and strength had grown in relation to his master. Now Shutra could see Karak's stats, who had become a level 24 commander in his service. Shutra was satisfied with the result, and commented that the skill was indeed very good. Then he asked Karak if he wanted to become the most powerful in the world, while delivering an enthusiastic motivational speech. Karak, however, still felt that the prince was acting a little strange and insisted that he needed to sleep. Skipping nights like that might not end well. The next morning, everyone arrived at the long-distance portal. It was the first time Shutra had ever used a portal like that, and he felt all the strangeness of being transported through a magical stream at extremely high speed. When he finally arrived on the other side, he nearly fell to the ground but assured everyone he was fine. Princess Felicia's arrival was marked by a warm reception from a group group of dark elf women. Shutra thought it resembled a fan club and mentally commented that she looked like an idol. Meanwhile, Chris and Caitlin were received respectfully by the lycanthropes. Shutra, on the other hand, realized that no one was there to greet him. In fact, the dark elves seemed more interested in gossiping about him. It was then that Shutra understood everything, and that place was divided into factions, just like in the castle. But he wasn't frustrated. He had already expected that. Looking at Carrick, he said it was time to begin his journey, step by step, without rushing. Later, he was taken to an old abandoned room that had clearly been forgotten over time. Carrick suggested they could use that space to unload their equipment. Shutra replied that even if it was a bad place, at least he had a room. Karak commented that the main event would only happen the next day, and that until then, everyone had free time to do as they pleased. But to Shutra, it felt more like an elegant way of saying he would rot there doing nothing. At that moment, a dark elf woman entered the room. Her name was Flora Sevward, and she was responsible for managing the castle. Shutra found it strange that someone of such a high position would show up in such a rundown place. She explained that she came because of the recent rise in Shutra's public merit, which had increased significantly. Because of that, he was now allowed to choose a new residence. Later on, he was with Isabella, a Lamia who specifically handled matters related to public merit. She had been assigned to help him select his new residence. To do so, she showed him a magical window with holograms displaying the prince's current score, 15,001 accumulated merit points. Shutra held merit rank 5 and decided to display all his achievements. He had discovered the dwarf portal, found ancient ruins, saved Felicia, mastered the thunder anvil, and completed many other important feats. Isabella commented that he was the first prince to achieve so many victories on his first mission. With that, Shutra went straight to check the catalog of available residences and ended up choosing a mansion that impressed him with its size and luxury. Later, Flora appeared wearing a maid outfit and said he had arrived too quickly because from that moment on, she would become his death maid. One of the attendants found her presence strange since they knew her as the castle manager. So Shutra explained that he had hired her using his own merit points. The next day, even his personal butler with a toothpick in his mouth seemed nervous. He said he was so tense he could barely hold himself together, which made Shutra even more uneasy. The pressure of the moment was intense. Caitlin arrived accompanied by Felicia and commented that both of them looked great, complimenting the clothes they were wearing. Felicia acknowledged that Shutra truly deserved everything he was receiving. Caitlin even joked that he looked very handsome. Shutra, in return, complimented both of them as well. Then Chris appeared wearing a fur coat and reminded him that this would be Shutra's first formal audience. According to him, it would be the day Shutra showed the demon castle who he really was. Many still believed he had gotten everything by luck, but soon everyone would be looking at him differently. Shutra had come to prove his true worth. Later, the princes and princesses gathered before the demon king, the supreme ruler of the demons, Mitra. The king's personal butler was in charge of reporting each child's accomplishments. Shutra was extremely nervous to be in front of the king. He had seen him before, but only through a video game screen. In real life, Mitra's presence was overwhelming. His aura was so intense that Shutra could barely breathe. However, the goddess within him reminded him that he also possessed the power of a conqueror and that he needed to endure the pressure. With that, Shutra gathered his courage and met his father's gaze with his own aura, which made Mitra look directly at him and call him by name. All the other princes were shocked by that. It was rare for the king to show such attention. Mitra declared that he expected to see even more achievements from Shutra in the future. The people present at the audience were equally surprised. The king had just called one of his children by name. Shutra replied that he would honor his father's words and prove himself worthy of being called the son of the demon king. In that moment, he was certain he had made an excellent first impression. He had made his name known in front of everyone. The next morning, Karak rushed into the room in a panic, saying that a letter had arrived directly from the public merit office. When Shutra opened and read the letter, he was astonished. The contents had been delivered personally by his father. It was a summons for another mission. Chris had received the same letter. It was a monster extermination mission. During a calm meeting over tea, Caitlin, Chris, and Shutra discussed their next steps. The mission was not just a simple task. Cassius was an annual event that carried great responsibility and prestige. Chris said he would participate if he weren't already busy, but Caitlin said she trusted that Shutra could handle it alone. Still, Chris warned that from that moment on, everyone would be watching his every move. The attention he was receiving could be beneficial, but it could also turn against him. Many people would try to bring him down. Upon hearing that, Shutra reflected and thought to himself that he already knew what awaited him. Not even Zephyr, while playing Night Saga, had ever been called by name during an audience with the king. Therefore, the fact that Shutra had been directly addressed by Mitra was something positive, but also concerning. Standing out so early could attract dangerous attention. Chris, noticing this, offered to help if necessary. He said that Shutra could contact him whenever needed and recommended that, before departing, he speak with Felicia, as she had something important to show him. Felicia was waiting for him with a special gift. Since he would be heading to Centaur territory, territory, she had prepared 2 mounts, one for him and one for Karak. These mounts looked like giant lizards, agile and well adapted to the plains. But Felicia also gave him one last, even more special gift, a necklace containing a tear from the Dark Elves. Shutra was surprised, wondering if she was truly giving him one of her race's treasures. Felicia explained that Dark Elves are an extremely proud race. They never forget the cruelty they receive, but they also never forget the kindness that is shown to them. She then hugged him tightly, wishing him a great adventure. Shutra was even more surprised by that gesture, as he never expected Felicia to act so affectionately toward him. After the hug, she quickly pushed him back, a bit embarrassed, and told him to hurry up and go. So Shutra departed, passing through a great teleporter capable of covering vast distances in an instant. On the other side, he arrived at the plains of Enger, a wide and dry region. As soon as he appeared, he was greeted by Karma, who had been assigned as his official guide. Shutra observed his new companion. She was unique. The upper part of her body resembled that of a human, but from the waist down, her body looked like that of a beast with strong and swift legs. She was, in fact, a satyr, a hybrid species known for its speed and agility. Karma introduced herself with respect and said it was an honor to serve Shutra during that mission. They soon departed together. Shutra and Karak rode their giant beasts, while Karma moved on foot, displaying great agility. Along the way, she informed them that it would take about 2 days to reach the Centaur territory. Karma asked if they had brought more soldiers, and Shutra replied that, for this mission, he had brought only his loyal squire. She then explained that some centaurs would be joining them at the destination, which brought some relief to the situation. Shutra then began to wonder whether this was a group mission. If so, the real challenge would be the weapons used. If they were riding mounts, the best option would be the use of spears. He was reflecting on this when, suddenly, loud noises began to echo across the desert, and tremors started to shake the sand. Frightened but determined, Karma swiftly moved forward to investigate the source of the sounds. Using her speed, she ran toward one of the great canyons in the region. There, she came upon a chaotic scene. A horde of creatures called Cassius was chasing a centaur, who seemed on the verge of being captured and devoured by the wild beasts. That was when Shutra jumped into action. Mounted on his beast, he arrived with force, throwing the first of the Cassius wolves far away. It was as if he were saying that he was already prepared, and that this was his welcoming committee. To Shutra, none of that mattered. Wielding his weapon, Earthquake, he thought that this situation might actually be useful to test his own strength. The terrified centaur asked if he was the prince sent for the mission, but Shutra had no time to answer. The giant black wolves of the Cassius race were already charging at him like true demons. He already knew exactly who the alpha of that pack was. As the monsters advanced, Karma approached, worried, wanting to know if he was all right. One of the attendants asked him not to go alone, saying it was too dangerous. Even so, Shutra confidently affirmed that everything was under control and that he could handle it. Without hesitation, he urged his mount forward and charged at the alpha of the pack. Using Earthquake, he activated the beast's explosive punch and struck the alpha wolf head-on with such devastating force that the creature's body simply exploded. Its limbs were thrown in every direction, and its head vanished among the rubble. The rest of the pack, overwhelmed with fear, fled far away. After that attack, Shutra noticed that his aura had grown stronger. The power of Earthquake was far more destructive than he had imagined. He was already nearing the same level of strength as Caitlin, which surprised him. Karma, impressed, praised the strength he had demonstrated. That punch, she said, had torn the head off a Cassius with a single blow. The centaur who had been saved thanked the prince deeply and introduced himself as Swift. From that moment on, he would be responsible for escorting him. After walking for a while, they finally arrived at the central encampment of the centaurs in the plains of Enger. In that region, there were 4 major centaur tribes: Gale, Heavy Rain, Raging Flame, and Dense Night. Among them, the Raging Flame tribe was considered the most powerful, and its chief also held the title of supreme leader over all the others. The leader introduced himself as Savage, the chief of the centaurs. For anyone familiar with the Demon Realm chapter in Night Saga, this encounter was inevitable. The name Savage was well known among players, but in the game, he was not an ally. On the contrary, he was a formidable enemy. Karak, watching closely, commented to the prince that Savage's gaze looked quite deadly. Shutra, maintaining his composure, introduced himself as the 9th prince of the Demon Castle and asked if Savage was aware of that. He also requested to be informed about the current situation in the camp. Opening the map, Savage explained that the situation was not good. The Cassius pack, which usually appeared in the north, had shown up in the south much earlier that year. Because of this, most of the scouts were occupied monitoring that region. As he listened, Shutra thought about how in the game, Savage was never a recruitable NPC, but perhaps in this new reality, things would be different for him. Savage explained that in 3 days, warriors from the 4 tribes would gather. With their combined forces, they believed they could defeat the Cassius. Curious, Savage asked if the rumor was true, that the prince had crushed a Cassius skull with a single punch. Shutra confirmed it, and said that if Savage wished, he could demonstrate how he had done it. Savage then looked at him with interest, and said he was eager to see all that power in person. When he returned to rest in his tent, everyone was already talking about the prince, who had defeated a Cassius with a single blow. Karak commented that the incident had made Shutra quite famous. The prince replied with humor, saying it was thanks to his natural charm and great virtue. Karak laughed and said he regretted ever complimenting him. Later, during his rest, Shutra experienced a new revelation. This time it came directly from Earthquake. A friendly spirit emerged from within the weapon's energy. It had come to ask the prince for help. This spirit was known as Green Wind. Green Wind was one of the nature spirits worshipped by centaurs and satyrs. In Night Saga, it was explained that the plains remained green and full of life thanks to the presence of such spirits. The world around Shutra began to shift. He was mentally transported to one of those serene green plains. The spirit of Green Wind led Shutra to her spiritual home, a sacred place where a fragment of her creator, the observer Enkel, was protected. Hearing that name, Shutra was stunned. He knew who Enkel was, one of the 6 ancient dragons, divine beings who had never appeared in person in the story of Night Saga, only being mentioned in myths. They were legendary creatures that players had never been able to encounter. Shutra reflected on what this meant. He had recently acquired the relic of Enkidu, and now he was standing before a fragment of Enkel. That couldn't be a coincidence. It was easy to forget, but he literally carried the power of protagonism. It was as if everything around him was being guided to place him at the center of events. The spirit explained that there was no time to lose. Monsters from the north were approaching. Their goal was to steal the power that kept the plains of Engar alive, destroying the spirits and erasing the fragment of Enkel. However, the spirit believed that Shutra was capable of protecting that place. Despite her confidence, he admitted that he was not strong enough to face such a threat. But Green Wind could feel the power of Enkidu within him, and she explained that the fragment of Enkel would grant him the strength he needed if he could reach it in time. When he returned to reality, Shutra was holding a small branch, the spirit's artifact. It was nighttime, but even so he ran straight to Savage, determined to warn him. He explained that the Temple of Green Wind was about to be attacked by the Cassius, and that there was no time to waste. The troops needed to be mobilized immediately. Savage, however, hesitated. He could not move an army based on a story alone. That was when Shutra revealed the sacred artifact. That relic was a divine proof, something impossible to forge. After thinking deeply, Savage accepted the situation and began gathering the soldiers that very night. By morning, everyone was already on the move. Shutra guided them using the map toward the exact location of the temple. It was a place he had discovered himself with the spirit's help. But what troubled him was the fact that the Cassius were already there. How had they found the fragment before them? When they arrived, they saw a dark army made up of dozens of black wolves, all ready to kill. Savage admitted there were far more enemies than he had expected and asked if Shutra had a plan. The prince recalled that, according to the spirit, the fragment would only unleash its full power inside the temple. He then asked Savage to do everything he could to hold the enemies back and open a path. His mission was to cross the battlefield and reach the heart of the sanctuary. By his side were Karak and Karma, both ready to accompany him to the end. Meanwhile, Savage led the Centaur army in a coordinated attack. A rain of arrows fell upon the enemies, clearing a path and weakening the front lines of the Cassius. Shutra and his 2 allies advanced toward the temple. Although they were intercepted a few times, the enemies were not true obstacles until a different kind of creature appeared. It was a large, distorted beast, resembling a corrupted satyr with wild eyes and a body covered in black flames. Before the creature could strike the prince, Karak sprang into action. With his axe in hand, he blocked the attack and told Shutra to keep going. There was no time to lose. The knight's mission was to protect the prince, even if it meant staying behind.